Hey y'all, my name is Kayla and welcome to my cozy chaotic corner of the internet. So the day I'm filming is July 1st, which can only mean one thing. It's time to do my June wrap-up video. First and foremost, I do not do half stars, I only do full star, whole star ratings. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. 5 stars means it is 10 out of 10 perfection. I would not change a single hair on that book. 4 star would be pretty similar to a 5. I really enjoyed it. It was really good, but there were just like a note or two I would have wanted to change about the book. 3 stars means it was just kind of a book. Like, it wasn't really great, it wasn't terrible, it was just like kind of middle of the ground. 2 stars is not my personal cup of tea, but someone else out there may find this book enjoyable. And then 1 star is, oh my god, why did I even waste my time on this book? I always like to note that I do include my DNFs on this list. I know it may be a controversial topic to some to give books that you DNF'd a rating, but my personal opinion is that you spent time with that book. And if you spent substantial amount of time where you feel like, you know what, I know as much about this book as I need to, and that is why I'm DNFing it, you should be able to give it a rating. So with all that noted, let's hop into the books that I read for the month of June. And we are actually starting out with the DNF, but this DNF will not be getting a rating. And that is The Murder of Mr. Wickham by Claudia Gray. The reason that The Murder of Mr. Wickham is not getting a rating is because this was kind of one of those books where I started it and I just wasn't in the mood to read it. Like, there was nothing about the book itself where I was just like, I am setting this book down vehemently, I will be returning back to Mr. Wickham, which is why I am not giving this a rating. But I did start The Murder of Mr. Wickham in June, so I figured I would just mention it. Next, we are heading into my 1-star reviews, and I also like to note that just because the first book I mention and then there's a second book I mention in a rating slot, that doesn't mean like the first book was like the least desired of the 2 1-stars. It's just how I wrote down this list. So just putting that out there, there's no like scale within the scale. The first 1-star is a DNF, and that is The Elegance of the Hedgehog.
Popping in to say that this is actually a 2-star review. And with that noted, the reasons I give throughout my explanation of the rating remain the same.
This book initially, when you read the synopsis of it, is giving like a more mature version of Eloise. There is a girl who lives on the 5th floor penthouse, and then there is a older woman who is kind of the housekeeper, the person in charge of the building. The reason I DNF'd this book, and even kind of looking into it after I DNF'd the book, this is supposed to be like a philosophical read, and it just didn't have the right storytelling mechanism for me personally. Like, I've read The Alchemist, which is amazing, but it's amazing because the storytelling is fluid and it's an actual storyline, whereas The Elegance of the Hedgehog alternates between the 2 perspectives of the older woman and the younger girl. While I really actually quite enjoyed the younger girl's perspective, when we came to the older woman's perspective, I was just kind of like, okay, skip. I didn't actually skip, but that's what I thought. That's like what I wanted to do. And I find that if a book ever has just like a section that I want to skip or a person that I want to skip, especially in a book that has alternating point of views, I'm technically only really wanting to listen to half of the story. So what is the actual point in reading the book? I'm sure at the end there would have been a wonderful story, like a wonderful little bow to be like, yes, I get it now. I just didn't want to waste my time getting to that point. The next 1-star review is also a DNF, and this is Death Comes to Pemberley. Death Comes to Pemberley was written in a tone that was very similar to how Jane Austen herself writes. So Death Comes to Pemberley is about the Pride and Prejudice crew. Initially, what I loved about this book was in the prologue, it was kind of giving a wrap-up or a synopsis, a breakdown of Pride and Prejudice. So it was kind of like, even if you haven't read Pride and Prejudice, you could have read Death Comes to Pemberley, because the prologue gives you like that breakdown of kind of what happened. Prologue's really long, by the way. It's not like a 2-page prologue. It's like a decent chunk of a prologue. In the prologue, after it kind of explains the story of Pride and Prejudice, it continues on with how things happened after Pride and Prejudice. And in that, it kind of alludes to the fact that Elizabeth had all along been scheming to make Darcy fall in love with her. So if you've ever read Pride and Prejudice or even watched Pride and Prejudice, they both seemed very indifferent towards each other at the beginning, Elizabeth and Fitzwilliam Darcy. In Death Comes to Pemberley, it is more saying like, Elizabeth the whole time was plotting and scheming to make Darcy fall in love with her. And the way it was explained, and how even the way it continued on in the first few chapters that I did read, I was just like, I'm not liking this. And then even past like that character change, we got to this one point where I was like, oh, the detectives are on hand. And they started like having little bits and pieces that I was enjoying. But then it got to the point where they were talking about the portraits and the paintings and the process of painting a painting and talking about the banisters. And I'm just all like, I have now lost interest in this book. I have lost interest in this book. Again, it was written so much like Jane Austen that it felt bizarre to be reading this murder mystery in the style of Jane Austen. So yeah, I hated it, but mostly because of that personality change that they made to Elizabeth. I just hated that so much. Everything else just kind of like piled up to the point where I was like, I do not give a rat's butthole about this banister. So I DNF'd it. I got rid of it. And, you know, now I have a little bit more space on my bookshelves for another book. We are heading into 2-star territory with Murder Road by Simone St. James. I have a whole video about this book, so go ahead and check it out. I'll also have it linked down below if you're okay with spoilers. I will say I literally just go on every single point that I do not like about that book, and a few points that I did like about that book. The reason that this book is a 2-star and not a 1-star is because there were some key elements that I enjoyed. Predominantly, there is a character, her name is Rose, and honestly, she was kind of like the saving grace of the whole story. Honestly, a lot of the like little side characters I loved. Where in April's head the whole time, I could not friggin' stand April. That is Murder Road by Simone St. James. Again, I have a whole video talking about Murder Road if you really want to know everything. Next, we are heading into our 3-star land. And again, these are just average books. They're good books. They're all right books. And we're going to start with Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. Honestly, I'm not going to lie. I thought this would be higher. I thought this was going to be a 4-star. I was never thinking this was going to be a 5-star, but I was thinking this would be a 4-star. And the reason this is a 3-star is because the first like quarter to almost third of the book, I was just kind of like, meh. It gives you character backstory, okay? I'll say that. So it is important for that section. It was just a section that I was just kind of like, meh. And then we get to about a third of the way through, and then it starts to pick up its speed. And it starts to get a little interesting. That's all I'm going to say on that. Let's just say there was a play. That's all I'm going to say. Our next 3-star is a book of poetry called Whiskey, Words, and a Shovel by R.H. Sin. So I actually have never just like sat down and read poetry. And I will say like this style of poetry is, I think, pretty simple to read. They're all pretty short little shorties. There were a couple poems in here where I was like, yes, I enjoy this. But then there's also a couple poems in here where I was rolling my eyes so far into the back of my head. On to our 4 stars. We are going to be kicking it off with Terms and Conditions by Laura Nasher. And I had no idea that I was going to be enjoying this book as much as I enjoyed this book. This book, if you know nothing about it, is about a family that owns Disneyland. They're 3 brothers. This is about one of the brothers, Declan. Their grandfather passes, and he was like the head honcho of Dreamland. And in his will, he pretty much is like, Declan can become CEO if he gets married and if he has a child. So the book literally starts off with them being like, hey Declan, did you meet your pretty much mail order bride? They literally had a woman who like signed a contract being like, yeah, I'll marry this guy and have 1 kid with him. And apparently he did meet her and he scared her off. So his assistant is sitting there being like, oh my fucking God. Declan's whole thing is he's a curmudgeon and he's not really a people person, and he is just very like, and Iris, who has been his assistant for the past 3 years, is just like the only person who gets him, who he tolerates, she tolerates him. Anyways, so literally chapter 1, she's like, fine, I will marry you. She's like, whatever. I already spend pretty much all of my time with you anyways. I have no social life. All I do is work. I'll just marry you. So they get married, and then, as we all know, we spend the book of them pretty much realizing like, oh my God, I actually do have feelings for you. But there is like the epilogue, though there's like an epilogue, and then there's an epilogue to the epilogue, and the epilogue to the epilogue. I cried. I think that's the one and only time I cried in this book, but it was so cute. I really enjoyed this book. This was a fun one. And it's a chonker. It looks like a chonker, I should say. This was actually a really quick read. I'm not gonna say I read it in a day, but when I was reading it, it was like section after section after section. I was like, oh my God, I'm almost done. Next 4-star is Do I Know You? And y'all, I really enjoyed this book. And this would have been a 5-star book if there were there were just like parts and bits and pieces that I wanted to skip. Do I Know You is about a husband and wife who has been married for 5 years now. They've been together for 7, and they're celebrating their 5th anniversary. We start with them in their car ride to this bougie resort. I'm not gonna lie, I forgot the characters' names. The husband's parents had gotten them like a week-long, all expense paid resort stay for their anniversary. And on the way there, we're starting from the wife's perspective, and she is just like, oh my God, this is gonna be the longest car ride ever. We never have anything to talk about anymore. They're out of the honeymoon phase at this point, and they are just living life, and you know, they feel like there's no spark anymore. And so we're just kind of like in that perspective in the start of the book. They get to the resort, and there's been a booking error. Pretty much they had booked a normal, just basic standard room, and then they had booked the honeymoon suite. So when they get there, like, oh, well, we have 2 rooms. The wife is a voice actor, and she's like, well, I have to, you know, do this audition. I know you don't want to listen to it, so I'll just take like the standard basic room for the night, and then we can like share the honeymoon suite the rest of the time. So he's like, okay, fine. She's like, so I'm gonna bring my stuff to the room and we will meet, like, let's meet at the bar. The husband gets to the bar first, and he meets this guy, Dave. How do I remember Dave's name, but not the main characters' names? But he meets Dave, and him and Dave are sitting at the bar, chit-chatting it up, and then the wife shows up, and she, like, goes to, like, say hi to them, but Dave interjects before the husband can say anything, and he's like, oh, hey, hi, hello, how are you? My name's Dave, this is my buddy, so-and-so. This sparks an idea in the wife. So she's like, follows along with it. I don't know you. You don't know me. And the wife's like, well, let's spice things up. Let's spend the next week or so role-playing. Let's pretend like we don't know each other. And like, let's just see what that does. And initially the husband is like, God, no. like in his head. But then eventually he's like, okay, yeah, sure, let's do this. It's really cute in theory, but one of the biggest things I did not like about it is that they built completely different characters for themselves. So it wasn't like the husband who is a lawyer in real life. He is now a finance pro in his character. And then the wife, who is a voice actor, is now pretending she's like a travel planner from Boston. So, cute book. I really enjoyed it, but I think that was kind of a big plot point that I wasn't a fan of. And again, there were just bits and pieces where I was like, pick up the pace a little. Just a little faster, guys. We can skip this part. And our final 4-star book, Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. I really, really enjoyed this book. The one thing that I think could have made this book better is I felt like there wasn't as much character development in this book as there was in Encyclopedia of Fairies. We're introduced to 2 new characters, a dude named Rose and Emily's niece. I cannot remember her niece's name. But even with those 2 characters included, they're more just like literal sidekicks. So we don't really even get much character development about them. Personally, I didn't think. And also the formula and layout of this book was very similar to Encyclopedia of Fairies. So I'm intrigued to see what the 3rd book, like how that's going to be laid out. So that's why this is a 4-star. Still really enjoyable. I still really liked it. We got a little bit more chemistry and sparks flying between Emily and Wendell, which I wasn't mad about that. Very PG spice, but it was nice to see that they were like, you know, getting a little bit more intimate. On to our 5-star ratings, and there's only 2 of them, which isn't bad. I'm waiting for the month where I don't have any 5 stars. I don't know if that's humanly possible for me at this point. I feel like every book I read, I'm like, oh my god, that was the greatest thing ever. Or I absolutely hate it. Like, it's very rarely is there a middle ground. Well, actually, I say that as like half of my books were like middle ground. We have My Sister, the Serial Killer. Am I holding this upside down? No. This was such a fun book. It was a quick read. It was an interesting way of storytelling that I've never really consumed before. If you've read this book and you can compare it to anything else in the writing style, let me know. But this book is about 2 sisters. We have an older sister who is a nurse and a younger sister who is like a social media influencer. And the social media influencer has a tendency of getting rid of men who do her wrong. And the older sister is always there to help clean up the mess. This was such a fun book. I don't even want to tell you kind of like the moral of the story because I feel like that gives it away. I loved it. Also, I listened to the audiobook. The narrator of the audiobook, I literally am checking out other books that she narrates just because she narrated this so well. And we all know I'm so picky when it comes to audiobook narrators because very few audiobooks do I actually enjoy, but this audiobook, amazing. I loved it. The narrator was perfection, and this book was perfection. My last book for the month of June is a book that I don't have a dust jacket to, because if you know me and you've been here long enough, there was a phase that I went through where I got rid of all my dust jackets because I was like, I just want a bunch of naked books. This is The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. I've never seen I never saw the movie ever. I might have to watch the movie and then like do a comparison between the book and the movie. This book is from the perspective of 3 different women who are all in each other's lives in some capacity. And when I tell you the amount of times I wrote red herring, red herring, red herring, red herring, red herring in the margins, let's just say I did not see the ending coming in any capacity. And if you've read Girl on the Train and you're just like, Kayla, I saw that from a mile away, you are much better of a thriller reader than I am. Because I was just like, we get the light bulb, right? I would say like maybe that much way through, but like there's still like a decent chunk through when we get the light bulb moment. But the twists and turns we get even when we get the light bulb. If you like thrillers, and you have yet to read The Girl on the Train. You're welcome. That wraps up my month of June. On to July. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments down below, have you read any of these books? Was there a book that I DNF'd where you're like, Kayla, that was the best book on the face of the planet? Or was there a 5-star where you're like, girl, I question your taste? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!